Before we begin, turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and listen carefully. Because tonight's story isn't just another legend. It's a true account whispered for decades. An abandoned mine where voices still echo. Voices of men who should have been dead for over 70 years. If you hear them calling your name while watching this video, don't answer. That's how they take you. Welcome to the Forbidden Files. The last shift. The air was heavy that morning, thick with coal dust and the sour tang of sweat already clinging to the men before they descended. The mine had always been a beast, an unfeeling, hungry thing that chewed up men and spit out bones. But on October 14th, 1947, it felt different. The lamps flickered against the damp stone as the shift trudged down, boots clanging against iron grates. A silence lingered between them, broken only by the hiss of lantern flames and the groaning timbers that strained against the weight of the mountain. Some of the older men crossed themselves quietly, muttering prayers their fathers had whispered before going underground. They all knew the risks. Cave-ins were common, methane explosions more so. But there had been warnings, strange ones. Just the night before, a foreman's son swore he heard voices coming from the sealed entrance, voices that called his name in the dark. He was beaten for lying, for scaring his sisters, but he didn't take it back. By noon, the mountain answered. It began with a tremor. The walls groaned as if the earth itself shifted uneasily in its sleep. The miners shouted, lanterns swinging wildly, shadows darting across the shaft like frantic spirits. Then came the collapse, a roar louder than thunder, louder than war. Timber shattered like brittle bones, rock poured down like water. The air filled with choking blackness. Men screamed, some crushed instantly, others swallowed by dust. A few survived the first blast and scrambled for air pockets in the rubble. Their cries echoed in the suffocating dark. That's when they heard it. Not the settling of stone, not the hiss of methane. Voices, clear as day though no light could be seen. Whispers that wove between the sobs of dying men. Voices of wives, of children, of brothers long dead. They called softly, coaxingly, promising safety, promising escape. One man, Elijah Turner, followed. Crawling toward the sound of his mother's voice, he clawed at the walls until his fingernails broke and bled. He swore he felt her hand brushing his shoulder, guiding him deeper into the mine's throat. Days later, when rescuers finally dug to that pocket, they found him with his body twisted in a narrow crevice, face contorted not in terror, but in something like rapture. Of the 34 men who went down that day, only 6 were pulled back alive. The others remained entombed, their bodies never recovered. But according to the rescuers, the strange part wasn't the corpses, it was the sound. More than one swore they heard voices in the stone. Chapter 1. The Forgotten Town. The town of Black Hollow never truly recovered. It had been a company town, built for one purpose, to feed the mine. Rows of identical houses lined the dirt roads, gray with coal dust, their porches sagging under the weight of broken dreams. After the disaster, families fled. Some left overnight, leaving behind dishes on tables and laundry still damp on lines. Others tried to stay, clinging to the hope the company would reopen the shaft. it never did. By the 1950s, Black Hollow was a ghost town, its windows boarded and its streets overgrown with weeds. But not everyone left. A handful of stubborn souls remained. Old women who couldn't bear to leave their husbands' graves. Men too broken to start again elsewhere. They lived in the shadow of the abandoned mine, and they carried with them the stories. The stories always began the same way. You don't go near the mouth after dark. At first, it was superstition. Miners were always superstitious lot, carrying charms, never whistling underground, never calling the mountain by name. But these weren't just old habits. People began hearing things. On windless nights, when the moon was thin and pale, voices drifted from the collapsed shaft. Some swore they heard their names carried on the breeze. Others said it was singing, low, mournful hymns that faded if you drew close. The children of the town, reckless and curious, made a game of it. They dared each other to run to the shaft and press an ear against the cold rock. Most came back pale, shaken, swearing they heard whispers. A few didn't come back at all. The first was Samuel Greer in 1952, 14 years old. He went with 3 friends to prove his courage. They waited for him by the tree line as he crept toward the shaft. They heard him laugh nervously, heard him call back that he was fine. Then they heard him speaking, low, as if answering someone. When he didn't return, they fled. Search parties combed the woods for days, but Samuel was never found. The only trace was his cap, lying in the mud near the mine's mouth. After that, the stories changed. The voices weren't just whispers, they lured. Chapter 2. The Whispers Begin. By the 1960s, Black Hollow had dwindled to less than a dozen families. Outsiders passed through now and then, hunters, drifters, the occasional urban explorer before the term existed, but most didn't stay long. There was something about the place, something in the air that made visitors uneasy. It wasn't just the silence, it was the feeling of being watched. Hunters reported hearing footsteps pacing them through the trees, always just beyond sight. Campers woke to soft humming outside their tents, though no tracks could be found in the morning. Even the animals seemed uneasy, steering clear of the mine and the woods around it. Then came the recordings. In 1967, a young college student named Robert Meeks came to document the folklore of Appalachia. He carried with him a reel-to-reel recorder and spent 3 nights camped by the mine. On the first 2, he captured only the normal sounds of the forest. But on the 3rd night, his tape picked up something else. At first, it was faint, a distant mutter, almost like wind through stone. Then it grew clearer, a woman's voice, soft and pleading. "Robert, Robert, come home." What made the recording infamous, at least among the few who ever heard it, was that Robert's mother had died 2 years earlier. When his camp was found days later, the recorder was there, still spooling tape. His tent was intact, his belongings untouched. But Robert Meeks was gone, as if the forest itself had swallowed him whole. The tape was played at the sheriff's office, and every deputy who heard it refused to go near the mine again. The reel was eventually locked away in evidence, forgotten in a dusty drawer. But the legend grew, and the voices kept calling. Chapter 3: The Ghost Hunters, 1984. By the 1980s, Black Hollow had earned a dark reputation among paranormal enthusiasts. Whispers of the mine spread in niche magazines, late-night radio shows, and folklore circles. It was exactly the kind of place that drew the young, the reckless, and the curious. In October of 1984, 4 such explorers arrived with more confidence than sense. They were part of a newly formed paranormal club from Ohio State University. Dennis, the ringleader, Mark, the skeptic, Sheila, the camera operator, and Lisa, the self-proclaimed sensitive. They brought bulky VHS camcorders, boom microphones, Polaroid cameras, and a Ouija board tucked inside Sheila's backpack. Their plan was to spend Halloween night in the abandoned town, then push into the woods and film at the mine entrance. The first few hours were uneventful. They laughed, smoked, shared beers stolen from a gas station cooler. But as the sun dipped, the atmosphere shifted. The air grew unnaturally still, as though the forest itself was holding its breath. By midnight, they had reached the mouth of the mine. The opening was a jagged scar of collapsed stone, framed by rotting timbers that groaned whenever the wind touched them. A rusted "Danger, keep out" sign dangled from a bent post. Lisa stiffened the moment they drew close. She whispered that she could hear something, faint singing, low and sorrowful. The others teased her, but when Dennis pressed his ear to the stone, his smirk faltered. He admitted he heard it too. They set up their equipment, joking nervously, and started rolling tape. Dennis, eager for theatrics, dared the spirits to speak. He shouted into the mine, his voice echoing through the hollow woods. The response came minutes later. On the tape, the group can be seen laughing, huddled near the collapsed shaft. Then the camera picks up something else. Voices, faint but clear, overlapping one another in whispers. The words are indistinct, but one name cuts through. Dennis. He went pale. Mark insisted it was a prank, maybe some local kids hiding in the woods. But then Sheila's camera swung wildly, capturing a brief glimpse of something in the shadows. Not a child, not a prankster, a pale figure crouched at the tree line, watching. The footage ends in chaos. Screams, the crunch of boots pounding through leaves, and the camera tumbling to the ground. It recorded for another 20 minutes, the lens fixed on the mine. In that span, faint footsteps can be heard approaching the camera, followed by a long, drawn-out whisper. "Don't leave us." The camcorder was found weeks later by a hunter. Of the 4 students, only Lisa's body was ever recovered, deep inside the woods, her fingernails torn and bloody as if she had clawed at the ground. The others were never found. The tape circulated in underground horror circles for years, whispered about at conventions, pirated onto grainy VHS bootlegs. Few saw it, fewer believed it, but those who did often spoke of one chilling detail. In the last seconds of audio, layered beneath the whispers, a child's voice can be heard. It says, "We're still here." Chapter 4: The Sheriff's Silence. Sheriff Charles Whitmore had been young when the 1947 collapse took his father. By the time of the 1984 disappearances, he was an old man, weary and gray, the last lawman still living in Black Hollow. He knew the stories better than anyone. He knew they weren't just folklore. When the university students went missing, he organized a search party. Dogs were brought in from the next county. Helicopters flew overhead. But the dogs refused to approach the mine, whining and pulling against their handlers. Helicopters reported strange interference on their radios when flying near the ridge. For 3 weeks they combed the woods. They found scraps of clothing, a broken flashlight, the camcorder, and Lisa's body. But there was no sign of Dennis, Mark, or Sheila. The townspeople whispered that the mine had claimed them, just as it had claimed Samuel Greer, Robert Meeks, and the 34 miners long ago. Sheriff Whitmore quietly closed the case. Officially, he blamed exposure, animal attacks, maybe an accident in the woods. Unofficially, he warned people, firmly, desperately, to stay away from the shaft. As years passed, he grew reclusive. Neighbors reported seeing him sitting on his porch at night, shotgun across his lap, eyes fixed on the dark tree line, as if waiting for something. When he died in 1997, his journal was discovered in a locked box beneath his bed. In it, he described hearing his father's voice almost nightly. He calls to me, says he's cold, says he's waiting. Sometimes I want to answer, but I know if I do, I won't come back. I think that's how it works. They wear your loved one's voice like a mask, but I can't stop listening. The journal ended with a single line, written the night before he died. Tomorrow, I'll go to him.
Final chapter. The last recording. By the early 2000s, Black Hollow was a ghost town in every sense of the word. The last residents had long moved away, leaving only hollow houses, collapsing barns, and the mine's scarred hillside. But with the rise of the internet, the legend of Black Hollow found a new life. Forums dedicated to paranormal mysteries began sharing pieces of the story. The 1947 collapse, the lost sheriff's journal, the vanished students. Urban explorers, armed with handheld camcorders and a hunger for online fame, flocked to the site. Most came back with nothing but shaky footage of rust and dust, but not all of them came back. In 2003, a pair of explorers known only by their screen names, Raven and Static, uploaded a single clip to an early message board. The video, filmed at night, showed them approaching the mine's entrance with flashlights. Their voices were hushed, nervous but excited. Halfway through, Raven sure she heard something. Static panned the camera toward the shaft. At first, it was only blackness. Then, slowly, a figure began to emerge, not walking, not stepping, but gliding forward, as if pulled by invisible strings. Its face was pale, blurred, as though the lens itself rejected the image. Static cursed, the camera jolted, and the video cut to Static. That file was the last anyone heard from them. No further uploads, no responses to messages. Their accounts went silent, their identities never confirmed. The clip was reposted, mirrored, analyzed endlessly, but always taken down within days. Users claimed that leaving it online brought strange glitches, looping audio, corrupted files, even whispered words through their speakers at night. The only piece of audio that could ever be isolated was faint, childlike, and carried the same words that Sheriff Whitmore had written in his journal decades earlier. "We're still here."